Now it's saying I'm connected, even though my laptop says it's disconnected. Hello? Okay. All right. Trying to update the stream title again. Oh man. I apologize to all you VOD viewers. Great. Okay. So, no viewers yet, so I'm not going to start reading. But in case if like no one shows up in another minute or so, I will just start reading for myself because that's really why I'm here. I see I have two bots or something, both named Alien and then a synonym of amalgamation, which is kind of funny. Alien Conglomeration and Alien Gathering. Those are fun names. Hope you're doing well, aliens. Okay, so let's get started. Oh, it's because I forgot to tell people. Okay. Hi. Yeah, I totally forgot. I was like, normally someone shows up by now. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't say anything. But yeah, uh, there was a big soccer finale. It's called the Champions League in Europe, and their final game, like their playoff game, was on Saturday, and I completely forgot about the stream. I was with a few of the guys from my soccer teams, and yeah, just totally forgot about it on Saturday. But interesting. Yeah, I don't know how Twitch notifications work. I don't think I've ever signed up for Twitch notifications. Yeah, we had pizza and lemonade and donuts and stuff, so it was good. Brownies. Um, so I guess it's been like since Thursday was the last time I streamed. Um, so on Thursday, uh, we discovered a number of things. One is that so like at the end of Wednesday, we were kind of like in a cliffhanger. It's like, why is Mr. Barrymore sneaking around at night? Also, is Mrs. Barrymore crying all the time at night and refused to do anything? And so Henry and Watson like followed Mr. Barrymore around and noticed that he was like shining a light out of one of the windows, and then they noticed a light shining back from the swamp, the moor. And they're like, "What is this? Who are you notifying? Like, what? Who are you signaling to?" And he's like, "It's not. I can't tell. Don't. I refuse to tell." And so Henry's like, "Okay." Then Mrs. Barrymore's like, "No, don't fire him. It's all my fault." It was also following everyone. She's like, "Actually, my brother, who you might know as Selden, the murderer who just escaped from jail, is hiding out on the and we've been giving him food or whatever. And so like, if you have to do something about that, that's fine. But like, I'm just trying to keep my brother alive, and don't don't take this out on my husband. Don't take this out on Mr. Barrymore." And Watson and they were like, "Ugh, fine, but now we have to go catch the murderer that you've been hiding out on our property." Um, so they ran off into the dark, in the middle of the night, towards a murderer. Um, and also where like the Hound of the Baskervilles rumored to live or to hunt or whatever. And so this is just pure genius by those two. Um, they eventually hear this mystical sort of noise. I think it was something like a cry, but it sounded more like a howling type cry as opposed to like a boohoo type of cry. Um, so they're like, you know what? Maybe we don't do this tonight. And so they went back. Um, they found like the hiding spot of the criminal, but he wasn't around. Um, yeah, so then the baronet was like super freaked out about it. That's Henry. And so as they're leaving, like Watson like sees a person standing up upon a hill. They're like, no, we just saw the criminal run in the other direction. Who is that guy? Um, Things are just getting super creepy. So then he's like, okay, how about we stop being idiots and running around at night? We go home. I'll tell Holmes some stuff, and hopefully he'll show up. Kind of a big adventure on. All right. So we'll just continue now. So far, I've been able to quote from the reports which I forwarded during these early days to Sherlock Holmes. Now, however, I've arrived at a point in my narrative where I'm compelled to abandon this method and to trust once more to my recollections, aided by the diary which I kept at the time. A few extracts from the latter will carry me on to the scenes indelibly fixed in every detail on my memory. I proceed then from the morning which followed our abortive chase of the convict and our other strange experiences upon the moor. October the 6th. Day with a drizzle of rain. The house is banked in with rolling clouds, which rise now and then to show the dreary curves of the moor, with thin silver veins upon the sides of the hills, and the distant boulders gleaming where the light strikes upon their wet faces. It is melancholy outside and in. The baronet is in a black reaction after the excitements of the night. I am conscious myself of a weight in my heart, and a feeling of impending danger, ever present danger, which is the more terrible because I am unable to define it. And have I not cause for such a feeling? Consider the long sequence of events which have all pointed to some sinister influence which is at work about us. There is the death of the last occupant of the hall, meaning Charles, fulfilling so exactly the conditions of the family legend, and there are the repeated reports from peasants to the appearance of a strange creature upon the moor. Twice I have with my own ears heard the sound which resembled the distant baying of a hound. It is incredible, impossible, that it should really be outside the ordinary laws of nature. The first time he was with the the butterfly guy, the naturalist, Stapleton, Mr. Stapleton, they were just like hanging out and they heard it. A spectral hound which leaves material footmarks and fills the air with its howling is surely not to be thought of. Stapleton may fall in with such a superstition, and Mortimer also, but if I have one quality upon earth, it is common sense, and nothing will persuade me to believe in such a thing. To do so would be to descend to the level of these poor peasants, who are not content with a mere fiend dog, but must needs describe him with hellfire shooting from his mouth and eyes. Holmes would not listen to such fancies, and I am his agent. But facts are facts, and I have twice heard this crying upon the moor. Suppose that there were really some huge hound loose upon it. That would go far to explain everything. But where could such a hound lie concealed? Where did it get its food? Where did it come from? How is it that no one saw it by day? Cotton Eye Joe. It must be confessed that the natural explanation offers almost as many difficulties as the other. And always, apart from the hound, there is the fact of the human agency in London, the man in the cab, and the letter which warned Sir Henry against the moor. This, at least, was real, but it might have been the work of a protecting friend as easily as of an enemy. Where is that friend or enemy now? Has he remained in London, or has he followed us down here? Could he be the stranger whom I saw upon the tour? Oh, also, I'm not sure if you were here for this, but the sister, Miss Stapleton, and Sir Henry Baskerville are kind of starting a relationship. Granted, like relationships back then were like, "Will you marry me?" And like 2 days after meeting each other. So, um, not sure if you were there for that, but Henry was like, "Hey, can I like go out and not talk and you have me not follow you, Watson?" And Watson's like, "No, I'm supposed to follow you wherever you go." And he's like, "Well, you're stupid. Goodbye." And Henry like ran away, and Watson like gave him like 100 meters or something, then followed him. And he and Miss Stapleton like met up in the. Okay, you remember that? Okay, great. So, but she also like warned them to not stay on the property. So it is true that I have only the one glance at him, and yet there are some things to which I am ready to swear. Who is he? Oh, the stranger who he saw. Okay, the person like on the hill that he saw in the middle of the night. It is true that I've only had the one glance at him, and yet there are some things to which I am ready to swear. He is no one whom I have seen down here, and I have now met all the neighbors. The figure was far taller than that of Stapleton, far thinner than that of Franklin, the crazy lawyer guy. Barrymore it might possibly have been, but we had left him behind us, and I am certain that he could not have followed us. A stranger then is still dogging us, just as a stranger dogged us in London. We have never shaken him off. If I could lay my hands upon that man, then at last we might find ourselves at the end of all our difficulties. To this one purpose I must now devote all my energies. Oh, now I feel like it's Holmes. Holmes is just following. But my first impulse was to tell Sir Henry all my plans. My second and wisest one is to play my own game and speak as little as possible to anyone. He is silent and distrait. Distrait? His nerves have been strangely shaken by that sound upon the moor. I will say nothing to add to his anxieties, but I will take my own steps to attain my own end. We had a small scene this morning after breakfast. Barrymore asked leave to speak with Sir Henry, and they were closeted in his study some little time. Sitting in the billiard room, I more than once heard the sound of voices raised, and I had a pretty good idea what the point was under discussion. After a time, the baronet opened the door and called for me. Barrymore considers that he has a grievance, he said. He thinks that it was unfair on our part to hunt his brother-in-law down where he, of his own free will, had told us the secret. The butler was standing very pale but very collected before us. I may have spoken too warmly, sir, said he, and if I have, I am sure that I beg your pardon. At the same time, I was very much surprised when I heard you gentlemen come back this morning and learn that you had been chasing Selden. The poor fellow has enough to fight against, without my putting more upon his track. If you had told us of your own free will, it would have been a different thing, said the baronet. You only told us, or rather your wife only told us, when it was forced from you and you could not help yourself. I didn't think that you would have taken advantage of it, Sir Henry. Indeed, I didn't. The man is a public danger. There are lonely houses scattered over the moor, and he is a fellow who would stick at nothing. You only want to get a glimpse of his face to see that. Look at Mr. Stapleton's house, for example, with no one but himself to defend it. There's no safety for anyone until he is under lock and key. He'll break into no house, sir. I give you my solemn word upon that. But he will never trouble anyone in this country again. Oh, what? Why is the word but there? Anyway, I assure you, Sir Henry, that in a very few days the necessary arrangements will have been made, and he will be on his way to South America. For God's sake, sir, I beg of you not to let the police know that he is still on the moor. They have given up the chase there, and he can lie quiet until the ship is ready for him. You can't tell on him without getting my wife and me into trouble. I beg you, sir, to say nothing to the police. What do you say, Watson? I shrugged my shoulders. If he were safely out of the country, it would relieve the taxpayer of a burden. He's a murderer. But how about the chance of his holding someone up before he goes? He would not do anything so mad, sir. We have provided with him all that he could want. To commit a crime would be to show where he was hiding. That is true, said Sir Henry. Well, Barrymore, God bless you, sir, and thank you from my heart. It would have killed my poor wife had he been taken again. I guess we are aiding and abetting a felony, Watson, but after what we have heard, I don't feel as if I could give the man up, so there's an end of it. All right, Barrymore, you can go. With a few broken words of gratitude, the man turned, but he hesitated and then came back. You've been so kind to us, sir, that I should like to do the best I can for you in return. I know something, Sir Henry, and perhaps I should have said it before, but it was long after the inquest that I found it out. I've never breathed a word about it yet to mortal man. It's about poor Sir Charles's death. The baronet and I were both upon our feet. Do you know how he died? No, sir, I don't know that. What then? I know why he was at the gate at that hour. It was to meet a woman. To meet a woman? He? Yes, sir. And the woman's name? I can't give you the name, sir, but I can give you the initials. Her initials were L.L. How do you know this, Barrymore? Well, Sir Henry, your uncle had a letter that morning. He had usually a great many letters, for he was a public man and well known for his kind heart, so that everyone who was in trouble was glad to turn to him. He was also a millionaire. But that morning, as it chanced, there was only this one letter, so I took the more notice of it. It was from Coombe Tracy, and it was addressed in a woman's hand. Well, sir, I thought no more of the matter, and would never have done had it not been for my wife. Only a few weeks ago she was cleaning out Sir Charles's study. It had never been touched since his death, and she found the ashes of a burned letter in the back of the grate. The greater part of it was charred to pieces, but one little slip, the end of a page, hung together, and the writing could still be read, though it was gray on a black ground. It seemed to us to be the postscript at the end of a letter, and it said, Please, please, as you are a gentleman, burn this letter, and be at the gate by 10 o'clock. Beneath it were signed the initials L.L. Have you got that slip? No, sir. It crumbled all to bits after we moved it. Had Sir Charles received any other letters in the same writing? Well, sir, I took no particular notice of his letters. I should not have noticed this one, only it happened to come alone. And you have no idea who L.L. is? No, sir, no more than you have, but I expect if we could lay our hands upon the lady that we should know more about Sir Charles's death. I cannot understand, Barrymore, how you came to conceal this important information. Well, sir, it was immediately after that our own trouble came to us. And then again, sir, we are both of us very fond of Sir Charles, as we well might be considering all that he has done for us. To rake this up couldn't help our poor master, and it's well to go carefully when there's a lady in the case. Even the best of us. He thought it might injure his reputation. Well, sir, I thought no good could come of it. But now you have been kind to us, and I feel as if it would be treating you unfairly not to tell you all that I know about the matter. Very good. Barrymore, you can go. When the butler had left us, Sir Henry turned to me. Well, Watson, what do you think of this new light? It seems to leave the darkness rather blacker than before. So I think. But if we can only trace L.L., it should clear up the whole business. We have gained that much. We know that there is someone who has the facts if we can only find her. What do you think we should do? Let Holmes know all about it at once. It will give him the clue for which he has been seeking. I am much mistaken if it does not bring him down. I went at once to my room and drew up the report of the morning's conversation for Holmes. It was evident to me that he had been very busy of late, for the notes which I had from Baker Street were few and short, with no comments upon the information which I had supplied, and hardly any reference to my mission. No doubt his blackmailing case is absorbing all of his faculties, and yet this new factor must surely arrest his attention and renew his interest. I wish that he were here. October 17th. All day today the rain poured down, rustling on the ivy and dripping from the eaves. I thought of the convict out upon the bleak, cold, shelterless moor. Poor devil! Whatever his crimes, he has suffered something to atone for them. And then I thought of that other one, the face in the cab, the figure against the moon, Was he also out in that deluge, the unseen watcher, the man of darkness? In the evening I put on my waterproof and walked far upon the sodden moor, full of dark imaginings, the rain beating upon my face and the wind whistling about my ears. God help those who wander into the great mire now, for even the firm uplands are becoming a morass. I found the black tor upon which I had seen the solitary watcher, and from its craggy summit I looked out myself across the melancholy downs. Rain squalls drifted across their russet face, and the heavy, slate-colored clouds hung low over the landscape, trailing in gray wreaths down the sides of the fantastic hills. In the distant hollow on the left, half hidden by the mist, the two thin towers of Baskerville Hall rose above the trees. They were the only signs of human life which I could see, save only those prehistoric huts which lay thickly upon the slopes of the hills. Nowhere was there any trace of that lonely man whom I had seen on the same spot 2 nights before. As I walked back, I was overtaken by Dr. Mortimer, driving in his dog cart through a rough moorland track which led from the outlying farmhouse of Foulmire. He has been very attentive to us, and hardly a day has passed that he has not called at the hall to see how we were getting on. He insisted upon my climbing into his dog cart, and he left me a lift homeward. He gave me a lift homeward. I found him much troubled over the disappearance of his little spaniel. Oh, it had wandered onto the moor and had never come back. I gave him such consolation as I might, and I thought of the pony on the Gripen mire, and I do not fancy that we will see his little dog again. Yeah. By the way, Mortimer, said I as we jolted along through the rough road, I suppose there are few people living within driving distance of this whom you do not know? Hardly any, I think. Can you then tell me the name of any woman whose initials are LL? He thought for a few minutes. No, said he, there are few Romanians and laboring folk for whom I can't answer, but among the farmers or gentry there is no one whose initials are those. Wait a bit, though, he added after a pause. There is Laura Lyon. Her initials are LL, but she lives in Coombe Tracey. Whoa, that's where the letter came from. Who is she? I asked. She is Franklin's daughter. What? Old Franklin the Crank? Exactly. She married an artist named Lyon, who came sketching on the moor. He proved to be a blackguard and deserted her. I don't know what that means. The fault from what I hear. The Crank? Yeah. The fault from what I hear may not have been entirely on one side. Her father refused to have anything to do with her because she had married without his consent, and perhaps for one or two other reasons as well. So, between the old sinner and the young one, the girl has had a pretty bad time. How does she live? I fancy old Franklin allows her a pittance, but it cannot be more, for his own affairs are considerably involved. Whatever she may have deserved, one could not allow her to go hopelessly to the bad. Her story got about, and several of the people here did something to enable her to earn an honest living. Stapleton did for one, and Sir Charles for another. I gave a trifle myself. It was to set her up in a typewriting business. He wanted to know the object of my inquiries, but I managed to satisfy his curiosity without telling him too much, for there is no reason why we should take anyone into our confidence. Yeah, I wanted to keep this a secret, and now Watson's telling everyone. Tomorrow morning I shall find my way to Coombe Tracey, and if I can see this Miss Laura, or Mrs. Laura Lyon, of equivocal reputation, a long step will have been made towards clearing one incident in this chain of mysteries. I am certainly developing the wisdom of the serpent, for when Mortimer pressed his questions to an inconvenient extent, I asked him casually to what type Franklin's skull belonged, and so heard nothing but craniology for the rest of our drive. I have not lived for years with Sherlock Holmes for nothing. Could you imagine? Although, to be fair, if I'm like talking to another Magic player, it's like, oh yeah, how do you feel about Jason the Mind Sculptor in Modern? And they just go, oh my god, blah, 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 blah. They'll have an opinion on it. soon we'll get Mental Misstep and Preordain Unbanned and Modern, and we can actually build Callblade again. Oh, and Gataxian Probe, but not too many people play. Not too many people play Gataxian Probe and Callblade. Yeah, what were we talking about? I have only one other incident to record upon the tempestuous and melancholy day. This was my conversation with Barrymore just now, which gives me one more strong card. Oh my god, could you imagine playing Gataxian Probe and Callblade? You just know whether or not you have to leave up Spell Pierce or Mana Leak? Why did no one do this? I am totally... that was a mistake. I shouldn't have started thinking about Callblade. This was my conversation with Barrymore just now, which gives me one more strong card which I can play in due time. Stop talking about cards. Mortimer had stayed to dinner, and he and the Baronet played écarté. Stop talking about cards. Afterward, the butler brought me my coffee into the library, and I took the chance to ask him a few questions. Well, said I, has this precious relation of yours departed, or is he still lurking out yonder? I don't know, sir. I hope to heaven that he has gone, for he has brought nothing but trouble here. I have not heard of him since I left our food out for him last, and that was 3 days ago. Did you see him then? No, sir, but the food was gone when I next went that way. Then he was certainly there. So you would think, sir, unless it was the other man who took it. I sat with my coffee cup halfway to my lips and stared at Barrymore. You know that there's another man, then? Yes, sir, there's another man upon the moor. Have you seen him? No, sir. How do you know of him, then? Selden told me of him, sir, a week ago or more. He's in hiding, too, but he's not a convict, as far as I can make out. I don't like it, Dr. Watson. I tell you straight, sir, that I don't like it. He spoke with a sudden passion of earnestness. Okay, I remembered why they didn't play Gataxian Probe. Is because although it was 60% of the meta or whatever, it was not 100% of the meta, and the other 40% of the meta included things like vampires and mono red burn, which are like comparable to at least Pioneer or Modern Burn was back then, because you had Searing Blaze, Goblin Guide, Lightning Bolt. So you can't just like Gataxian Probe and be like, oh yeah, what did I expect? You have 12 points of burn in your hand. I'm glad I made it 2 points easier for you. Okay. In the mirror, I'm sure it's great, but yeah. Yeah, like once Baskervilles was printed, it actually made Callblade have no bad matchups. So. Now listen to me, Barrymore. I have no interest in this matter, but that of your master. I have come here with no object except to help him. Tell me frankly what it is that you don't like. Did I miss something? Okay. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like this other person hanging out. Barrymore hesitated for a moment, as if he regretted his outburst or found it difficult to express his own feelings in words. It's all these goings-on, sir, he cried at last, waving his hand towards the rain-lashed window which faced the moor. There's foul play. There's also Splinter Twin, which would have been great to have Gataxian Probe against. It's all these goings-on, sir, he cried at last, waving his hands towards the rain-lashed window which faced the moor. There's foul play somewhere, and there's black villainy brewing, to that I swear. Very glad I should be, sir, to see Sir Henry on his way back to London again. But what is it that alarms you? Look at Sir Charles's death. That was bad enough, for all the coroner said. Look at the noises on the moor at night. There's not a man would cross it after sundown if he was paid for it. Look at this stranger hiding out yonder and watching and waiting. What's he waiting for? What does it mean? It means no good to have anyone of the name of Baskerville, and I'm very glad I shall be to be quit of it all on the day that Sir Henry's new servants are ready to take over the hall. But about the stranger, said I, can you tell me anything about him? What did Selden say? Did he find out where he hid or what he was doing? He saw him once or twice, but he is a deep one and gives nothing away. At first he thought that he was the police, and soon he found that he had some lay of his own. A kind of gentleman he was, as far as you could see, but what he was doing he could not make out. And where did he say he lived? Among the old houses on the hillside, the stone huts where the old folk used to live. But how about his food? Selden found out that he's got a lad who works for him and brings all he needs. I dare say he goes to Coombe Tracey for what he wants. It is Holmes. This is just Holmes. He has the child doing work for him. Anyway. Very good, Barrymore. We may talk further of this at some other time. When the butler had gone, I walked over to the black window and I looked through the blurred pane at the driving clouds and at the tossing outline of the windswept trees. It is a wild night indoors, and what must it be in a stone hut upon the moor? What passion of hatred can it be which leads a man to lurk in such a place at such a time? And what deep and earnest purpose can he have which calls for such a trial? There, in that hut upon the moor, seems to lie the very center of that problem, which has vexed me so sorely. I swear that another day shall not have passed before I have done all that man can do to reach the heart of the mystery. Okay, some really awkward sentences in there, and I got super distracted with magic, but that's okay. The Man on the Tor. The extract from my private diary, which forms the last chapter, has brought my narrative up to the 18th of October, a time when these strange events began to move swiftly towards their terrible conclusion. The incidents of the next few days are indelibly graven upon my recollection, and I can tell them without reference to the notes made at the time. I start them from the day which succeeded that upon which I had established two facts of great importance. The one, that Mrs. Laura Lyon of Coombe Tracey had written to Sir Charles Baskerville and made an appointment with him at the very place and hour that he met his death. The other, that the lurking man upon the moor was to be found among the stone huts upon the hillside. With these two facts in my possession, I felt that either my intelligence or my courage must be deficient if I could not throw some further light upon these dark places. I had no opportunity to tell the baronet what I had learned about Mrs. Lyon upon the evening before, for Dr. Mortimer remained with him at cards until it was very late. At breakfast, however, I informed him about my discovery and asked him whether he could care to accompany me to Coombe Tracey. At first he was very eager to come, but on second thoughts it seemed to both of us that if I went alone the results might be better. The more formal we made the visit, the less information we might obtain. I left Sir Henry behind, therefore, not without some pricklings of conscience, and drove upon my new quest. Risky business. When I reached Coombe Tracey, I told Perkins to put up the horses, and I made inquiries for the lady whom I had come to interrogate. I had no difficulty in finding her rooms, which were central and well appointed. A maid showed me in without ceremony, and as I entered the sitting room, a lady, who was sitting before a Remington typewriter, sprang up with a pleasant smile of welcome. Her face fell, however, when she saw that I was a stranger, and she sat down again and asked me the object of my visit. The first impression left by Mrs. Lyon was one of extreme beauty. Her eyes and hair were of the same rich hazel color, and her cheeks, though considerably freckled, were flushed with the exquisite bloom of the brunette, the dainty pink which lurks at the heart of the sulphur rose. Admiration was, I repeat, the first impression, but the second was criticism. There was something subtly wrong with the face, some coarseness of expression, some hardness, perhaps, of eye, some looseness of lip which marred its perfect beauty. But these, of course, are afterthoughts. At the moment I was simply conscious that I was in the presence of a very handsome woman, and that she was asking me the reason for my visit. I had not quite understood until that instant how delicate my mission was. "I have the pleasure," said I, "of knowing your father." It was a clumsy introduction, and the lady made me feel it. "There is nothing in common between me and my father," she said. "I owe him nothing, and his friends are not mine. If it were not for the late Sir Charles Baskerville and some other kind hearts, I might have starved for all that my father cared." "It was about the late Sir Charles Baskerville that I have come to see you." The freckles started out on the lady's face. "What can I tell you about him?" she asked, and her fingers played nervously over the stops of her typewriter. "You knew him, did you not? I have already said that I owe a great deal to his kindness. If I am able to support myself, it is largely due to the interest which he took in my unhappy situation." "Did you correspond with him?" The lady looked quickly up with an angry gleam in her hazel eyes. What is the object of these questions?" she asked sharply. "The object is to avoid a public scandal. It is better that I should ask them here than that the matter should pass outside our control." She was silent, and her face was still very pale. At last she looked up with something reckless and defiant in her manner. "Well, I'll answer," she said. "What are your questions?" "Did you correspond with Sir Charles?" "I certainly wrote to him once or twice to acknowledge his delicacy and his generosity." "Have you the dates of those letters?" "No." "Have you ever met him?" "Yes, once or twice. When he came into Coombe Tracey, he was a very retiring man, and he preferred to do so by stealth." "But if you saw him so seldom and wrote so seldom, how did he know enough about your affairs to be able to help you, as you say that he has done?" She met my difficulty with the utmost readiness. "There were several gentlemen who knew of my sad history and united to help me. One was Mr. Stapleton, a neighbor and intimate friend of Sir Charles's. He was exceedingly kind, and it was through him that Sir Charles learned about my affairs. I knew already that Sir Charles Baskerville had made Stapleton his almoner upon several occasions, so the lady's statement bore the impress of truth upon it. "Did you ever write Sir Charles asking him to meet you?" I continued. Mrs. Lyon flushed with anger again. "Really, sir, this is a very extraordinary question." "I am sorry, madam, but I must repeat it." "Then I answer, certainly not." "Not on the very day of Sir Charles's death?" The flush had faded in an instant, and a deathly face was before me. Her dry lips could not speak the "no" which I saw rather than heard. "Surely your memory deceives you," said I. "I could even quote a passage of your letter. It ran, 'Please, please, as you are a gentleman, burn this letter and be at the gate by 10 o'clock.'" I thought that she had fainted, but she recovered herself by a supreme effort. "Is there no such thing as a gentleman?" she gasped. "You do Sir Charles an injustice. He did burn the letter, but sometimes a letter may be legible even when burned. You acknowledge now that you wrote it." "Yes, I did write it," she cried, pouring out her soul in a torrent of words. "I did write it. Why should I deny it? I have no reason to be ashamed of it. I wish him to help me. I believed that if I had an interview, I could gain his help, so I asked him to meet me." "But why at such an hour?" "Because I had only just learned that he was going to London the next day, and might be away for months. There were reasons why I could not get there earlier." "But why rendezvous in the garden instead of a visit to the house?" "Do you think a woman could go alone at that hour to a bachelor's house?" "Well, what happened when you did get there?" "I never went." "Mrs. Lyon!" "No, I swear to you, on all I hold sacred, I never went. Something intervened to prevent my going." "What was that?" "That is a private matter. I cannot tell it." "You acknowledge, then, that you made an appointment with Sir Charles at the very hour and place at which he met his death, but you deny that you kept that appointment." "That is the truth." Again and again I cross-questioned her, but I could never get past that point. "Mrs. Lyon, said I as I rose from this long and inconclusive interview. You are taking a very great responsibility and putting yourself in a very false position by not making an absolutely clean breast of all that you know. If I have to call in the aid of the police, you will find somehow serious. Sorry. If I have to call in the aid of the police, you will find how seriously you are compromised. If your position is innocent, why did you, in the first instance, deny having written to Sir Charles upon that date? Because I feared that some false conclusion might be drawn from it and that I might find myself involved in a scandal. And why were you so pressing that Sir Charles should destroy your letter? If you have read the letter, you will know. I do not say that I have read all the letter. You quoted some of it. I quoted the postscript. The letter had, as I said, been burned, and it was not all legible. I ask you once again why it was that you were so pressing that Sir Charles could destroy this letter, which he received on the day of his death. The matter is a very private one. The more reason why you should avoid a public investigation. I will tell you, then. If you have heard anything of my unhappy history, you will know that I made a rash marriage and had reason to regret it. I have heard so much. My life has been one incessant persecution from a husband whom I abhor. The law is upon his side, and every day I am forced by the possibility that he may force me to live with him. At the time that I wrote this letter to Sir Charles, I had learned that there was a prospect of my regaining my freedom if certain expenses could be met. It meant everything to me. Peace of mind, happiness, self-respect, everything. I knew Sir Charles's generosity, and I thought that if he had heard the story from my own lips, he would help me. But then how is it that you did not go? Because I received help in the interval from another source. Why then did you not write to Sir Charles and explain this? So I should have done had I not seen his death in the paper the next morning. The woman's story hung coherently together, and all my questions were unable to shake it. I could only check it by finding if she had indeed instituted divorce proceedings against her husband at or about the time of the tragedy. It was unlikely that she would dare to say that she had not been to Baskerville Hall, if she really had been, for a trap would be necessary to take her there, and could not have returned to Coombe Tracy until the early hours of the next morning. Such an excursion could not be kept secret. The probability was, therefore, that she was telling the truth, or at least a part of the truth. I came away baffled and disheartened. Once again I had reached that dead wall which seemed to be built across every path by which I tried to get at the object of my mission. And yet the more I thought of the lady's face and of her manner, the more I felt that something was being held back from me. Why should she turn so pale? Why should she fight against every admission until it was forced from her? Why should she have been so reticent at the time of the tragedy? Surely the explanation of all this could not be so innocent as she would have me believe. For the moment I could proceed no further in that direction, but must turn back to that other clue which was to be sought for among the stone huts upon the moor. And that was a most vague direction. I realized it as I drove back and noted how hill after hill showed traces of the ancient people. Barrymore's only indication had been that the stranger lived in one of these abandoned huts, and many hundreds of them were scattered throughout the length and breadth of the moor. But I had my own experience for a guide, since it had been shown to me. I had my own experience for a guide. The experience is the guide, since the experience had shown me the man himself standing upon the summit of the Black Tor. That, then, should be the center of my search. From there I should explore every hut upon the moor until I lighted upon the right one. If this man were inside it, I should find out from his own lips, at the point of my revolver if necessary, who he was and why he had dogged us so long. He might slip away from us in the crowd of Regent Street, but it would puzzle him to do so upon the lonely moor. On the other hand, if I should find the hut and its tenant should not be within it, I must remain there, however long the vigil, until he returned. Holmes had missed him in London. It would indeed be a triumph for me if I could run him to the earth where my master had failed. He is making the assumption that they are the same person. And I'm not sure whether we've ever had an assumption be wrong like this, so who knows? Maybe it's not Holmes. Luck had been against us again and again in this inquiry, but now at last it came to my aid, and the messenger of good fortune was none other than Mr. Franklin, who was standing, grey-whiskered and red-faced, outside the gate of his garden, which opened on to the high road along which I travelled. "Good day, Dr. Watson," cried he with unwonted good humour. "You must really give your horses a rest, and come in to have a glass of wine, and to congratulate me." My feelings towards him were very far from being friendly, after what I had heard of his treatment of his daughter, but I was anxious to send Perkins and the wagonette home, and the opportunity was a good one. I alighted, and I sent a message to Sir Henry that I should walk over in time for dinner. Then I followed. How are these messages being delivered? I'll never understand the 1800s. Then I followed Franklin into his dining room. "It is a great day for me, sir, one of the red-letter days of my life," he cried with many chuckles. "I have brought off a double event. I mean to teach them in these parts that law is law." Yeah, right? Just children just following people around and be like, "Okay, I'll deliver your letter." "And that there is a man here who does not fear to invoke it. I have established a right of way through the center of Old Middleton's Park. Slap across it, sir, within 100 yards of his own front door. What do you think of that? We'll teach these magnates that they cannot hide roughshod over the rights of the commoners. Confound them. And I've closed the wood where the Fernworthy folk used to picnic. These infernal people seem to think that there are no rights of property, and that they can swarm where they like with their papers and their bottles. Both cases decided, Watson, and both in my favor. I haven't had such a day since I had Sir John Morland for trespass because he shot in his own warren." "How on earth did you do that?" "Look it up in the books, sir. It will repay reading. Franklin versus Morland, Court of Queen's Bench. It cost me £200, but I got my verdict." "Did it do you any good?" "None, sir, none. I am proud to say that I had no interest in the matter. I act entirely from a sense of public duty. I have no doubt, for example, that the Fernworthy people will burn me in effigy tonight. I told the police last time they did it that they should stop these disgraceful exhibitions. The country constabulary is in a scandalous state, sir, and it has not afforded me the protection to which I am entitled. The case of Franklin versus Regina will bring the matter before the attention of the public. I told them that they would have occasion to regret their treatment of me, and already my words have come true." "How so?" I asked. The old man put on a very knowing expression. "Because I could tell them what they were dying to know, but nothing would induce me to help the rascals in any way." I had been casting round for some excuse by which I could get away from the gossip, but now I began to wish to hear more of it. I had seen enough of the contrary nature of the old sinner to understand that any strong sign of interest would be the surest way to stop his confidences. "Some poaching case, no doubt," said I, with an indifferent manner. "Ha ha, my dear boy, I have a very much more important matter than that." "What about the convict on the moor?" I stared. "You don't mean that you know where he is?" said I. "I may not know exactly where he is, but I am quite sure that I could help the police to lay their hands on him. Has it never struck you that the way to catch that man was to find out where he got his food, and so to trace him?" He certainly seemed to be getting uncomfortably near the truth. "No doubt," said I, "but how do you know that he is anywhere upon the moor?" I know it. Oh, I know it because I have seen with my own eyes the messenger who takes him his food. I hope he's mixing this up with who I think is Holmes. My heart sank for Barrymore. It was a serious thing to be put in the power of this spiteful old busybody, but his next remark took a weight from my mind. You'll be surprised to hear that his food is taken to him by a child. I see him every day through my telescope upon the roof. Aha! It was relevant that he has a telescope. He passes along the same path at the same hour, and to whom should he be going except to the convict? Here was luck indeed, and yet I suppressed all appearance of interest. A child. Barrymore had said that our unknown was supplied by a boy. It was on his track and not upon the convicts that Franklin had stumbled. If I could get his knowledge, it might save me a long and weary hunt. But incredulity and indifference were evidently my strongest cards. I should say that it was much more likely that it was the son of one of the moorland shepherds taking out his father's dinner. The least appearance of opposition struck fire out of the old autocrat. His eyes looked malignantly at me, and his gray whiskers bristled like those of an angry cat. Indeed, sir, said he, pointing out over the wide-stretching moor. Do you see that black tor over yonder? Well, do you see how the low hill beyond, with a thorn bush upon it? It is the stoniest part of the whole moor. Is that a place where a shepherd would likely take his station? Your suggestion, sir, is a most absurd one. I meekly answered that I had spoken without knowing all the facts. My submission pleased him and led him to further confidences. You may be sure, sir, that I have very good grounds before I come upon an opinion. I have seen the boy... Oh, well, I'm not doing his voice, I guess. Every day with his bundle, and sometimes twice a day. I have been able... But wait a minute, Dr. Watson. Do my eyes deceive me? Or is there, at the present moment, something moving upon that hillside? It was several miles off, but I could distinctly see a small dark dot against the dull green and gray. Come, sir, come, cried Franklin, rushing upstairs. You will see with your own eyes and judge for yourself. The telescope, a formidable instrument mounted upon a tripod, stood upon the flat leads of the house. Franklin clapped his eye to it and gave a cry of satisfaction. Quick, Dr. Watson, quick, before he passes over the hill. There he was, sure enough, a small urchin with a little bundle upon his shoulder, toiling slowly up the hill. When he reached the crest, I saw the ragged, uncouth figure, outlined for an instant against the cold blue sky. He looked round him with a furtive and stealthy air, as one who dreads pursuit. Then he vanished over the hill. Well, am I right? Certainly. There is a boy who seems to have some secret errand. And what the errand is, even a county constable could guess. But not one word shall they have from me, and I bind you to secrecy also, Dr. Watson. Not a word, you understand. Just as you wish. They have treated me shamefully. When the facts come out in Franklin versus Regina, I venture to think that a thrill of indignation will run through the country. Nothing would induce me to help the police in any way. For all they cared, it might have been me instead of my effigy, which those rascals burned at the stake. Surely you are not going. You will help me to empty the decanter in honor of this great occasion. But I resisted all his solicitations and succeeded in dissuading him from his announced intention of walking home with me. I kept the road as long as his eye was on me, and then I struck off across the moor and made for the stony hill over which the boy had disappeared. Everything was working in my favor, and I swore that it should not be through lack of energy or perseverance that I should miss the chance which fortune had thrown my way. The sun was already sinking when I reached the summit of the hill, and the long slopes beneath me were all golden green on one side and gray shadow on the other. A haze lay low upon the furthest skyline, out of which jutted the fantastic shapes of Belliver and Vixen Tor. Over the wide expanse there was no sound and no movement. One gray great bird, a gull or a curlew, soared aloft in the blue heaven. He and I seemed to be the only living things between the huge arch of the sky and the desert beneath it. The barren scene, the sense of the loneliness, and the mystery and urgency of my task all struck a chill into my heart. The boy was nowhere to be seen. But down beneath me, in a cleft of the hills, there was a circle of the stone huts, and in the middle of them there, there was one which retained sufficient roof to act as a screen against the weather. My heart leaped within me as I saw it. This must be the burrow where the stranger lurked. At last my foot was on the threshold of his hiding place. His secret was within my grasp. As I approached the hut, walking as warily as Stapleton when when with poised net he drew near the settled butterfly, I satisfied myself that the place had indeed been used as habitation. A vague pathway among the boulders led to the dilapidated opening which served as a door. All was silent within. The unknown might be lurking there, or he might be prowling on the moor. My nerves tingled with the sense of adventure. Throwing aside my cigarette, I closed my hand upon the butt of my revolver, and, walking swiftly up to the door, I looked in. The place was empty. Here's another one of those instances where we add these like extra clauses and like almost like three sentences kind of like built into one, just to say like he wasn't there. It's like a little bit more of that suspense. We have this nerves tingling of adventure. We do this thing, we do this thing, we do this thing, we do this thing, and it was empty. The suspense thing. But there were ample signs that I had not come upon a false scent. This was certainly where the man lived. Some blankets rolled in a waterproof lay upon that very stone slab upon which Neolithic man had once slumbered. The ashes of a fire were heaped in a rude grate. Beside it lay some cooking utensils and a bucket half full of water. A litter of empty tins showed that the place had been occupied for some time, and I saw, as my eyes became accustomed to the checkered light, a pannikin and a half-full bottle of spirits standing in the corner. In the middle of the hut, a flat stone served the purpose of a table, and upon this stood a small cloth bundle, the same, no doubt, which I had seen through the telescope upon the shoulder of the boy. It contained a loaf of bread, a tin tongue, and 2 tins of preserved peaches. As I set it down again, after having examined it, my heart leapt to see that beneath it lay a sheet of paper with writing upon it. I raised it, and this was what I read, roughly scrawled in pencil. Dr. Watson has gone to Coombe Tracy. For a minute, I stood there with the paper in my hands, thinking out the meaning of this curt message. It was I, then, and not Sir Henry, who was being dogged by this secret man. He had not followed me himself, but he had sent an agent, the boy perhaps, upon my track, and this was his report. Possibly I had taken no steps since I had been upon the moor, and which had not been observed and reported. Always there was this feeling of an unseen force, a fine net drawn round us with infinite skill and delicacy, holding us so lightly that it was only at some supreme moment that one realized that one was indeed entangled in its meshes. If there was one report, there might be others, so I looked round the hut in search of them. There was no trace, however, of anything of the kind, nor could I discover any sign which might indicate the character or intentions of the man who lived in this singular place, save that he must be of Spartan habits and cared little for the comforts of life. When I thought of the heavy rains and looked at the gaping roof, I understood how strong and immutable must be the purpose which had kept him in that inhospitable abode. Was he our malignant enemy, or was he by chance our guardian angel? I swore I would not leave the hut until I knew. Outside, the sun was sinking low, and the west was blazing with scarlet and gold. Its reflection was shot back in ruddy patches by the distant pools which lay amid the great Grimpen mire. There were the 2 towers of Baskerville Hall, and there a distant blur of smoke which marked the village of Grimpen. Between the two, behind the hill, was the house of the Stapletons. All was sweet and mellow and peaceful in the golden evening light, and yet as I looked at them, my soul shared none of the peace of nature, but quivered at the vagueness and the terror of that interview which every instant was bringing nearer. With tingling nerves but a fixed purpose, I sat in the dark recess of the hut and waited with somber patience for the coming of its tenant. And then, at last, I heard him. Far away came the sharp clink of a boot striking upon a stone, then another and yet another, coming nearer and nearer. I shrank back into the darkest corner and cocked the pistol in my pocket, determined not to discover myself until I had an opportunity of seeing something of the stranger. There was a long pause which showed that he had stopped. Then once more the footsteps approached, and a shadow fell across the opening of the hut. "It is a lovely evening, my dear Watson," said a well-known voice. "I really think that you will be more comfortable outside than in." Yeah, of course it's Sherlock. Come on. We all knew this. Or maybe not, but... Okay. Oh, second viewer, I literally just finished, like, the last words. But I hope you're having a good time. There will be a VOD. We just finished up chapter 11, and I have to go in a minute or two. But this whole chapter was about exploring the letter that was written to Sir Charles, and who wrote it, and why. And it seems to be this woman named Laura Leon, who I totally forgot to write down. Beneficiary of Charles, wrote a letter to him to meet at the time of his death. Yeah, so cool stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so I guess that's it for me today. Obviously, the boy just summarized Watson's letters. It's like, okay, he's going off to Coombe Tracy. And so Sherlock Holmes is like, thanks for the update. Now Watson's in my little hut. Okay. But yeah, hope you enjoyed. Tomorrow 2:30 I think is doable because I'm not working tomorrow, so I think 2:30 will be pretty comfortable. Thursday though, I will not be streaming because all the coaches are going to Santa Cruz, which is a beach. But yeah, I will see you tomorrow at 5:30 Eastern. Take care, and down with Big Brother.